We continue our conversations this morning with Mandy Gunasekara. She joins us to talk about some of the things that are happening in and around our nation's capital. And goodness gracious, there is a lot going on. Mandy, good morning to you.
Good morning, and great to be with you, Richard.
You as well. By the way, how are you feeling? Know that we're getting close to a due date. Not much farther. Feeling okay?
Yeah, feeling great. I'm just 3.5 weeks out, so feeling good, staying inside and out of this heat. That's for sure.
3.5 weeks, but who's counting, right?
Yeah, just by the hour.
Yeah, by the hour, if not the minute at this point. Mandy worked in President Trump's administration during his first term. She was chief of staff at the Environmental Protection Agency. She's an author. She is a lawyer and keeps up with what's going on in D.C. right now. I guess there are two big directions, two big stories that are going on right now, and then there's a whole lot of other stuff that I feel like people have lost sight of. Let's start on the Epstein stuff, because to me this is the most polarizing topic that exists within, I guess, politics, period, but specifically Republican politics, because there are a lot of President Trump supporters who felt like there was a bit of a bait and switch here, that they were told during the election cycle, during the campaign time, this information is going to be released. And now that we've gotten into it, there's not a lot of information. They went with the kind of performative deal of let's go to the courts and get them to unseal the grand jury testimony. The court said no, which most people said was going to happen anyway in this case. What is your take on where we are in the Epstein saga and the Trump administration's beliefs or their role in the whole thing?
Yeah, I think that additional clarity will come out. I think a lot of this stems from Attorney General Bondi. She kind of blew the rollout, really. And also President Trump and others on the campaign trail alluding to some sort of document, a client list that doesn't seemingly exist. And so I think it's just a combination of speaking specifics to an issue for which they didn't have access to the full breadth of information. Now that they do, the rollout has totally been botched. I mean, it was really inexcusable what Attorney General Bondi did with some of the noted conservative podcasters that have been at the heart of the MAGA movement with President Trump all along. And she gave them these big binders and told them that all the information they were looking for was there. And then when they started digging into it, there was nothing new. So yeah, and it was kind of it was a head scratcher for sure, and was frustrating, and it seemed like a betrayal for those people who had put so much on the line. So I really think it's them reeling from that botched rollout. I do think, and I know some of the people who are specifically working on getting additional facts that they can release to the public. Of course, this is all mired in the complexities of grand jury testimony, sealed court documents, protection of witnesses, all of these things that kind of come together. So all that being said, I understand people's frustration. I share some of that frustration. I think it could have been avoided with a better rollout and being more honest about what we didn't have from the get-go. Perhaps saying that there was alluding to things that don't exist as we all want them to be. Some nice little client list where people can excoriate and go after additional people who perpetuated this sick, disgusting behavior that we saw from Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. I will say that Todd Blanche, who is senior level attorney general staffer at the DOJ, is going to engage with Ghislaine Maxwell. This has never happened before. And he is seeking any credible evidence she may have for people who, again, engaged in this disgusting criminal behavior. So there's a legitimacy. There will be more clarity for the broader public. I don't think it's going to be what was expected and what was sold. And I understand the frustration around that latter point.
So there was a House Oversight Committee that subpoenaed Ghislaine Maxwell that you were talking about there a second ago. Mike Johnson said this yesterday, said that this was during a press conference, doubted if Maxwell can be, quote, counted on to tell the truth, close quote, but supported Oversight Committee James Comer's investigation. What should we read into that?
Yeah, well, I think Ghislaine Maxwell, what does she have to lose? She's in prison. This is typically the case If you're following criminal instances where someone's been put behind bars basically for the rest of their life, or in this instance for the rest of her life, and all of a sudden they're going to get attention, and maybe from that attention they can seek some sort of pathway out of their current situation. So you can't just bring her in and suddenly herald her up as some super hyper credible witness. The public, and which is what the left is largely doing. It's really interesting. A lot of the Democrats that are suddenly intellectually curious about this case, when for 4 years under the Biden administration, we got absolutely nothing from it, which really stemmed a lot of the frustration around it, and what we're kind of dealing with at this point as well. But what I say is people are genuinely looking into it. I will say from what we've seen in Congress, sometimes when they get critical confidential information, they can't keep it. They leak it. I would expect that if it goes to Congress, that some of this information will be leaked. And you better believe the things that will grab the headlines for mainstream media will be information designed to paint President Trump and this administration in the worst possible light. So I do think that Speaker Johnson, he understands that. He is wants to ensure that all of this is teed up in a very clear way, but obviously supports the interests and the intent of Representative Comer and other lead investigators from the House of Representatives to be able to go after and look into this alongside, again, what the Trump administration is already doing by virtue of devoting significant resources and the number 2 leadership at the Department of Justice to look into it as well.
Visiting with Mandy Gunasekara, former chief of staff at the Environmental Protection Agency during the first Trump administration. Through that role, I feel like you had a pretty unique vantage point to see the change that happened. And it was like there was constant change during that 4 years, people coming and going, high level, trusted. Now they're just out on the street. We haven't seen nearly as much of that in the first 6 months. There's been turnover, but not high-level turnover, especially at the cabinet level so far. It felt like a couple of weeks ago we might be looking at the highest profile turnover so far when you saw significant frustration. There's a lot of reported frustration from Dan Bongino, deputy director at the FBI, Kash Patel. For whatever reason, there seems to still be a great deal of trust in those two people in particular being at the top of the FBI, and Pam Bondi, who you mentioned earlier, is the Attorney General, less so. They're people that they wanted to scalp, right? I mean, if something goes wrong, everybody wants somebody fired, especially when the president is famous for saying you're fired on a television show to critical acclaim. Why is it that Patel and Bongino seem to have escaped that kind of public I don't know, like figurative stoning from the MAGA movement, from the right side of this movement, and somebody like Pam Bondi has not?
Yeah, I think the president understands that there can be slip ups and mistakes, but he prioritizes loyalty. And you have to think about the people who are in these top level cabinet positions. They've been loyal to him from the very beginning. They were loyal from early 2015, 16, going through the campaign, all the way through to the time when Mar-a-Lago was raided and he was subject to continual numerous criminal investigations at the federal and state level. And so he's not going to let one potential slip up and an understandable frustration among some within the MAGA community at the rollout. He's not going to let that undermine what is more important. And President Trump alluded to some of this during a recent press conference where this was ultimately brought up, but he particularly praised Pam Bondi for the work she's doing on much bigger substantive issues. Of course, Epstein is sucking up all the oxygen in the room, and a lot of this has to do with the fact that some of the mainstream media see this fracture and they want to use it to try to undermine or distract from a lot of these bigger wins that President Trump has achieved, and that key people in his administration, whether it's Attorney General Pam Bondi or FBI Director Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, and the great folks that are over there, that he would let someone like that out of this administration, because then you have to think about, well, you got to replace them. Who would that be, number one? And that would be a very long, drawn-out process.
Yeah.
No, it's not. That's not.
It's not. We'll continue our conversation with Mandy Gunasekara on the other side of this timeout. Russia, this story that continues to get oxygen, to use her words from just a second ago, the role that Tulsi Gabbard is playing. What about Scott Bessent and economic policy and the pressure on the Fed to lower interest rates? We'll get into that on the other side of this timeout. Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk, Mississippi. Mandy Gunasekara is my guest. We're back after this. Hey, just a little breaking news for you. I stepped outside for just a minute in the break. Yeah, sometimes in the winter we'll have those days where like the high temperature for the day is first thing in the morning and then it gets colder throughout the course of the day. Today, not going to be one of those days, just in case you were wondering. It's going to be hot all over the Magnolia State today and moving forward toward the Neshoba County Fair and for the foreseeable future, so hang in there. Mandy Gunasekara is my guest, former chief of staff and the Environmental Protection Agency during the Trump administration, round one, and author. The book is called Y'all Fired. If you haven't checked it out, haven't read that, it is worth the read. A lot of stuff that has happened, frankly, in the early part of this second Trump administration. So Mandy, I guess the biggest story, or the story that's getting the most headlines right now, is the declassification of these documents by Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, with regard to Russian collusion in the 2016 election and the role that the Obama administration played in the not just the prevalence but the advancement of that story. There's a lot to unpack. So maybe let's just start high level. Like what do you think is the overarching theme in this whole Russia collusion new information story?
Yeah, I think it's clear that President Obama was directly involved in manipulating intelligence to successfully plant the seeds for this Russiagate investigation on his way out. And then, the resulting consequences of that was the 4 years where we're constantly hearing about Russia, 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 as President Trump characterized. And, just you can go back and forth. You can look and see the left's tactics where they put up these, well, you had the setup with Comey, and then that leaked report about the meeting with Comey where he was asking President Trump about some of the most salacious aspect of the completely defunct Steele dossier that was a product of Hillary Clinton's campaign. So you have that piece of it. And then President Trump pushing back, and then all of the media saying, President Trump on the defense as he responds to these allegations of Russian election interference. And we just had to deal with that as a country. The president, the time, energy, and resources that wasted. It is beyond frustrating, but it's great that D&I Director Tulsi Gabbard is in there. She's releasing this information, and she's also given it to the people that can ensure people will be held to account, even if it goes to the highest levels. I'll say the other thing, Richard, I remember going back is not only were these people manipulating intel to try to undermine the legitimacy and the success of the incoming president, but Comey, Comey and others at the top level were put out as these noble men that were pursuing this cause of potential election interference, and it was all completely bogus, number one, and number two, solely the result of political efforts to try to undermine President Trump and his incoming administration.
Feels like the name of a law firm, like Brennan, Comey, and Clapper.
I know.
I have found myself going, okay, which one of these guys goes with which three-letter agency? What have we got in there? So a lot of moving parts in this. One of the things that some people have talked about is, Donald Trump fought so hard for immunity for a sitting president, and it was we understand that was a bit self-serving, but also probably important for the president. And carrying out his official duties. Is that immunity going to apply to Barack Obama? Are people that are, just like pinching themselves, they're so excited about the possibility of Barack Obama going to jail, mistaken? Or are they wasting energy in hoping for that or thinking about that because of some of the immunity laws that were put in place or upheld by the Supreme Court?
Yeah, immunity laws put in place for the protection of the executive. And I do think that those are very, very important. I think you're bringing up a really good point. And I think for the broader public, we've got to manage expectations. I highly doubt that President Obama, former President Obama, will end up in jail. Now, will there be damage to his reputation? Could people who worked under him, again, Brennan, Clapper, and Comey, the worst of the worst, they could certainly be held to account. And recall that the immunity was largely applied to the conversations that staff have with the president as they are informing him of various options about different policy decisions, all these things that are important for purposes of being able to present a president with the state of play, the facts, and being able to make sound policy calls with all the information that's available. That doesn't extend to criminal activity. And to the extent that there is hard set evidence for that, it kind of changes the landscape. Again, I'm a little out of my realm here. This is not my
Yeah, that's
area of
fair.
expertise, and I'm happy to admit that. But I do think people should manage expectations. The picture of former President Obama going to jail, I don't think that would happen. I'm short of something really big that maybe we don't know of. I'm going to keep that open. But I do think he could be subject to depositions and having to go testify, and, being a part of that whole process.
C Spire text line 601-879-4395. This is something that has been said a lot. Rubio agreed. Senate Republicans agreed. Heck, even Tulsi Gabbard back in 2019 agreed that Russia worked to influence the election. So, knowing that they were involved with this process and this long report that Robert Mueller delivered and everything else, what has changed? Was the coercion so deep that even they were fooled in the process? Did they go along to get along? Is there new information?
Yeah, there is new information, and I think
are they just playing for a different team now, and so their loyalties lie with the team for which they're currently playing?
No, I think there's new information, and the information is that yes, I think belaboring the point that we all know, Russia tried to interfere with the election. I believe that's a bit of a distraction and something we've known for a long time. It was actually in the original assessment report that just came out that basically said Russia has tried in the ways that they always have. I'm paraphrasing slightly here, but they had no actual impact because they lacked sophistication and the ability to actually interfere. That was essentially the summary of the initial report. That what the new information now shows is President Obama and his team saw that. They did not like that intelligence because it basically did away with any notion that Russia interfered to an extent that had an impact on the actual outcome, number one, and number two, that was to the benefit of President Trump, which was their whole story. So the new information is that they had that clear picture of information. They could have released that to the public, and we could have all moved on. But they didn't. They buried that report, and President Obama specifically directed them to go find something better. Again, I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially he said, go find something better. And the something better was the Steele dossier, which is a product of Hillary Clinton's campaign that was just completely baseless, that the career intelligence folks initially dismissed, and rightfully so, but because of political pressure from President Obama and those top three, they resurrected it in a way that planted the story that then really was a dogged issue throughout the entirety of the Trump presidency and then thereafter.
When you look at the makeup of Donald Trump's cabinet, there were some superstar names. You know, whether you're talking about Marco Rubio at State or Howard Lutnick with Commerce, or Pete Hegseth, or Pam Bondi, or Kash Patel, or RFK Jr., or Linda McMahon. The list just goes on and on and on. These household names. And yet I feel like very, very few people knew the name Scott Bessent when he was named into his role where he was going to run economic policy for the United States. And yet I might argue that the Secretary of the Treasury has been the biggest star of this administration so far. His delivery is a little stilted. He is a little stiff. He's clearly very, very smart. He's wittier, I think, than anybody realized. What do you make of of the job that Scott Bessent has done in touting and implementing Donald Trump's strategy for the economy.
Yeah, I think he's done an absolute fantastic job. And I would agree with you on your assessment. He was the lesser known. He was certainly known in the professional circles, obviously
Right.
very known to President Trump himself. But yeah, outside of that, he wasn't a part of the media game, or he wasn't a head of a Senate office like Senator Marco Rubio that had run for various high level positions. So yeah, I mean, I think that he is reflective of the substance that President Trump knew he would need for someone who is going to fix the economy, address inflation, try to onshore businesses, negotiate better trade deals, which is it's very precarious in the interim, but once you get the deal, you've got a great deal. He knew he was going to need somebody that he wouldn't have to double check, and that person was Scott Bessent. I think he's done
Yeah.
a phenomenal job, and he has just been this voice of stability and reason all throughout.
Sometimes politics makes for strange bedfellows. A guy that was a partner at Soros Fund Management is now the number one economic guy. Mandy, thanks as always for your time. Hope you have a great weekend.
You as well. Good to be with you.